Right. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming out. Because we're in the middle of summer, it's quite hard to get people to come out and do things. So thank you very much for coming. Quite a good turnout. So before I introduce Alan, I will, as some of you will see me do before, quickly just go over the idea of this series. So we're trying to, with this series, get a broad range of perspectives from different people within medical technology and healthcare. So we're trying to get people, be it clinicians, users, engineers, academics, business people, a broad range of people with all sorts of different perspectives. And then we're trying to get the format to be a very relaxed one. So not like a formal academic lecture, more trying to get a bit of people's backstories, what it's like doing their job more day to day, and where they're heading in the future with the work they're doing. So a lot more relaxed than a standard lecture series with data slides and things like that. And then we're also trying to build a bit of a community of interested people across the university, of staff and students, and again trying to hopefully having that reflect the range of backgrounds. So we've got quite a few clinicians here today, we've got some engineers, we've got business people, we've got quite a nice mix even in this session. And this is anticipating the new MSc that we're launching. So this should be the last session without the MSc students in it. So our new MSc in Medical Technology, Innovation and Design, and the students for that will hopefully be here and benefiting from this community we're trying to build. A few thank yous. A few of these people actually aren't here. But firstly to Cheryl, who has funded the beer and non-alcoholic refreshments that will follow this session. Cam, who also hasn't shown up but has opened his wallet for the pizzas that will follow this session. Igor at the back there, who is our technical guy who films these sessions, edits them up and puts them online. Sarah, who has the glorious job of ordering the pizzas and doing some other, so they're rubbish. And then Matt, who is our media hype man, but who has been caught away and couldn't get here tonight and has been replaced by Susan. So Susan will be taking a few pictures for social media. If you don't want to be in them, then just let Susan know and she will avoid you. You've been avoided. Okay. So this is a few of the talks we have coming up. So you'll see here we've got quite a range of different people, business, some marketing people, some academics, and some engineers as well. And these will continue through the year. And if you want to know about what we've got coming up, you can go on our webpage for the series. So that has the speakers listed on it. You can sign up for the next session there as well. They're all free, but we just need to know numbers for food and things like that. And that's also where the sessions will be uploaded, where Igor's videos will go. So if you want to watch any of the previous ones, you can watch them on there as well. Okay, but today we have Alan. So some of you will know Alan. I know you know Alan from the conversations you're having earlier. But some of you will know Alan because Alan did his MSc and his PhD here. So your PhD was had Carl as one of the supervisors, Carl Verschoor, who was the former director of the implant service. So following the theme that I raised earlier, so I've asked Alan to give a bit of his deeper life story, because I think he has a very interesting one, as well as his work launching a startup company and his academic work, and then also a bit of a view of the future. So without further ado, I shall try to seamlessly pass to your laptop.
Screen swap works.
Very smooth, look.
There we go. Cool. That's the highlight, downhill from here. So, yeah, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. Thanks for you all attending. I can see lots of familiar faces in the audience and some new faces, that people that I haven't met before. And I think probably some of those faces are involved with the course that Mark has told me so much about. And it's really great to be with you in the room when there's it sounds like such an amount of overlapping interest when it comes to healthcare, tech, innovation, and global health. So yeah, Let me tell you a bit about what I'm all about then. So Mark asked me to say a few words about where I'm from and what the kind of context is for why I see things the way I do. So I'm from 1950s Lancashire. I was born in 1951. So Burnley doesn't look much dissimilar to this right now. The chimneys aren't there anymore because they've been decommissioned, but Burnley is an industrial town in the northwest. It is wet. The dampness is important for its industry, which is cotton weaving. So that canal runs from Liverpool to Leeds, and all along it are towns and villages that would have been originally driven by wheels and then were steam powered, and it was the boom area of England and the world in the Industrial Revolution. And by the time I was born, in the 80s there, maybe not so booming. And by then, obviously, the industry had closed down and a lot of the factories are decommissioned, a lot of people out of work, and it's a completely different story there. So there's no real prosperity in the 1980s and 90s Burnley that I'm from. It's not to give a woe is me, but it's quite a different kind of backdrop socioeconomically, kind of in terms of the services, the professions, the industries there compared to where we are now on the south coast. That's the backdrop. I left school and became an electrician. I went straight out of school as quick as I could at 16 years old, and I didn't know any better. I'm the first person in my family to go to university and didn't have any advice about what the next steps could be, how to slot my kind of profile of natural skills and capabilities onto a profession that would be fulfilling and valuable to someone. I knew that I was roughly into technical things, I was pretty good in science. We didn't really pay any attention to my GCSEs at that point. It was just, this is what people do. So off I went and did that for 3 years and passed that and qualified as an electrician. But by that time, I'd realised that this was not the path for me. And there's all interesting maybe backdrop to that, which is too much for this talk. It essentially meant that I took a turn from being an electrician to begin my path into being a scientist. That's when the GCSEs all of a sudden mattered. And I was really glad that there was some teachers who dragged me along to make sure that the GCSEs did at least get to a standard that I would be eligible to get onto some education. So without boring you for too long, I was obsessed with nature and the systems of nature and did a degree in biology. I was lucky enough to get into the University of Manchester. I'd never heard of a polytechnic university at that time. So I interviewed for all the universities were in Manchester because I thought that was a cool city and it was near to where I'm from. I didn't want to go too far away because at that point I'd never been south of Crewe. And I got into University of Manchester because I had a great conversation with one of the lecturers there. And based on the great conversation, I thought University of Manchester is the one. Manchester Metropolitan University looked a lot better. It looked cleaner. It had new labs. And I had a great conversation with this guy. I'll go to the one that felt like a vibe. Turns out I was at the better university, and that stood me in much better stead. And I got a placement at the Sanger Institute in Cambridge as part of that degree. I did an MRes in neuroscience. At that point, I was just doing this thing of, wait a minute, my natural skills and the feeling of like, this thing's really inspiring and I'm not doing too badly at it. I'm going to follow that line. That was serving me well. And I took a slight detour here where I chose audiology, which is a kind of an applied science, clinical. And the reason for that was music. So I thought the audiology would have loads of cool signal analysis and musical stuff and perception of sound. And it turns out it's a lot about hearing aids. And I still do music, but it was kind of a slight misturn. But actually, if you looking at the bits that make up a person's drive for a career in a granular way, it might not be music, but it's still pretty applicable. I'm really interested in the perception of sound, communication, people's experiences as a result of communication, and helping them to have that experience. So whether I'm really interested in people vibing with the music in a concert, or a person connecting with their partner via amplification or some other stimulation, I'm getting at the same problem. So that's a young me in 2009. And what I thought I was doing there, so I'd gone on this training course for audiology, and what I thought I was doing was training to get Health and Care Professions Council registration to do this profession, which would allow me to apply my science training. But actually, what was going on, and I think this has built up ever since this time, was I was meeting people like this chap. This is a guy, he always sticks out because this is handwritten, and he wrote me a letter at the time. This was for the 70-year anniversary of the Battle of Britain. So I was in Cambridge at the time doing my clinical training, and I would meet people like this. So we sat and I tested his hearing, different tones and speech perception, and we set up his hearing aids. And while we were doing that, he came in wearing his medals, and he was sharing with me what it was like being in this squadron, Squadron 12 in Bomber Command. So he lost all of his colleagues one night. He was injured and didn't go out with them on that Lancaster, and was telling me the story of how he felt horribly guilty for not going out. Anyway, it's a long story, but he was sharing with me while I was helping him with his hearing aids, and we were opening up this channel of communication, which he wrote in his letter was opening the hangar door. And it just really drilled into me that there's another layer here. It's not just compassion for the sake of, oh, I care for people in my CV. Something happened there where I was able to do something for him via the technology and my training that I wouldn't have been able to do without any of that. Yeah, quite a beautiful moment. So I wanted to take that further. So to understand his hearing loss and patients like him who are having severe problems with hearing, I felt for my path I needed to do some science, some research. And I got, at the time, I got a teaching fellow position at Southampton and managed to use that to get a part-time PhD and built my research career off the back of that kind of in. So cochlear implants, you all know this, but for those in the room that haven't seen this wonderful bionic device before, we just have a device that has some hardware implanted inside the head, some of which is implanted deep inside the kind of hearing apparatus, and it will stimulate the auditory nerve, and it will allow technology to overcome the huge attenuation of a severe to profound hearing impairment. So like David Butler, there's a gap between us. We can't open that hangar door or open up or communicate and have that quality of life. And this is an example of one of the prosthetic devices that can allow us to bridge that gap. But the thing about my PhD was that doesn't work as well for everyone. So for some people, there are problems where the performance is not as high as we might expect it to be. And in some cases, that's due to the way that the electrode array is being surrounded by fibrotic, you might call it scar tissue. And this is true of all implantable devices. When I was finishing the PhD, little anecdote, Elon Musk was recruiting for his brain chip, Neuralink. And he wanted to recruit like 100 histologists. They're the people that chop up the tissue around the device and stain it to work out why it's wrapped in scar tissue. And I was thinking, based on what we get in the ear, the device in the brain, they've got some steep hills to climb, because the array gets wrapped in various immune cells that rush to the site, secrete molecules that say, there's something here that we need to envelop and we need to try and get rid of it. And there's a healthy reaction to that, which most people would have with an implanted bio device. And there's an amount of response that's unhealthy. And we can model that response electrically, which is one of the things that we did. So we took an implant from a patient where the device had gone wrong, like an adverse event. And we stained that tissue, and we found some evidence of over-inflammation and over-proliferation, so the tissue's growing aggressively. Maybe that is partially or wholly the explanation for that failure in that case. Another study we did was with 500 patients mapped across 5 years. We can measure their electrical impedance across there and across the rest of the tissue of the head to a reference electrode. If it's really high resistance, you might think of it, there's too much tissue. Maybe it's wrapped even in bony tissue sometimes. And we can statistically potentially pull out the individuals that are looking like they might be problematic in future. So this is an example of having a clinical problem and applying some technical, statistical measurement techniques to learn something about the system, and then take that data to think about how you might innovate in future to make things different. So this is the first time I'm thinking about translational approaches to devices in healthcare. So we've got a problem that we're seeing in these soft failures, these adverse events. Generate a research question. We did a mouse study, we did the cellular staining, and we did the telemetry measurements where we measure patient data over time. And we get some insights mechanistically, and then we can use that insight to innovate. And there are, as some of you know in the room, there are companies now developing electrodes that are made of different materials or elute steroids or other anti-inflammatory molecules. So this research is the kind of thing that does go on to drive new inventions and improvements in patient outcomes. When I was wrapping up the PhD, I joined the Future Worlds spin-out kind of startup accelerator here in Southampton. And you can see the ideas I'm having here about personalised care. We'll be able to measure patients with different ways, hearing, telemetry, maybe blood markers that tell you about their inflammatory status. That's another study that was done in our lab. A paper that we put out around that time as well was urinary markers for inflammation. Maybe this stuff can tell you something about the kind of broader picture of a person's physiology that could tell you about how you might treat them in a more personalised way and targeted way. So we came up with the idea of having a company, a clinical company, that would start to be able to measure that stuff and triage patients to give them personalised care. So we just said the tagline, transforming the way hearing is measured and nurtured for the future. We took some ideas about how you could have this in an app, which tests you might do to best triage people out into subsets. What would it be that we'd be looking for over time? My backstory is that I have a genetic predisposition to sensory neural hearing loss, and my brother does as well. If I'd have known that when I was 19, I would have behaved differently. You can imagine me with my head in a speaker stack at 21 years old, not knowing that I'm vulnerable. And once I realised it was too late, and I am that cliche case of if you don't watch your hearing, and it was too late. And it gives me a personal motivation to want to offer that to people. But I've put these in the wrong order, so that it would have been a great little segue into this. But I pitched this idea in various ways with apps, maybe bits of hardware, to get a feel for what investors might want to fund. So quite rightly, they said, what is it, the specific problem you're trying to get at? I'm giving this broad, kind of slightly vague thing about people. We need to do better to split them into stratifications and deal with them in a more personalised fashion. I'm not exactly sure because the genetics and the exposure factors are so variable, we don't really have the data yet for me to talk in really concrete terms about what it is that we're doing. I'm on the right track, but yeah, specifically, if we're going to fund it, we need to know more closely. You sound smart and you sound like you've got this clinical experience because you've done your clinical training, you've got your PhD now, but are you just a thought leader? Are you just saying clever things that are going to bring people along, but you're not the one to have the idea that's going to bring aboard the big kind of funding stream? Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. That was a thing to take on board. This was a big one. People want painkillers, not vitamins. We were selling the idea that if I'd have known earlier in my life, like this kind of philosophical jumping around in time where I get to know something about what would happen to me if I don't behave a certain way, they were like, we know, we run businesses. People want to make the pain go away once the hearing loss is kicked in. So you need a hearing aid company. And it turns out to be somewhat true, but there's a bit of nuance to that. I mean, you guys know in the room that work with patients, you know that there's a balance there. It was a wake-up call to hear these things in front of the dragons. You've seen these things. What do your customers really want? Yes, they want to be treated like an individual with their own maybe genetic profile and other factors that describe them physiologically, but there's probably some commonalities around the target group that you're going for. What is that? Anyway, we didn't really have the clear answers to this, so we decided that we would start a clinical service. We were qualified to do that. So the two of us, my colleague Conor O'Kane, who I met actually in Southampton, he went off to do pure clinical. So we came together as a kind of a clinician and a researcher coming together to build this service to learn, if we spend a year or two, what can we get from our patients so we know what we can deliver for them. So we've learned that consumers are facing a minefield. They go from one provider to another. Is it Specsavers? Is it this private place? Is it the hospital? They can't navigate it, and they still can't. So can we do better there? They're all nervous about the younger ones, especially. I have this clinic in Brighton. People that are listening to music, performers, people that work in the music industry, audio, they've got anxiety about protecting their hearing. They're the people that want vitamins. And there's, I would say, an increasing appetite for vitamins, maybe across culture, definitely in hearing. Remote care. More and more patients are interested in the smartphone delivered ways of looking after hearing devices. I think you can now do that in cochlear implants, and we're doing it in hearing aids. They still want experts. So although we want remote care, they do still want the highly qualified person that can distill down the evidence and do the right thing for them. This is a key one. I recently went to the therapeutics conference for RNID, and they were presenting all the new drug trials, and it's very exciting. We now have a gene therapy. You know that there's gene therapies now that are working for the first time. But what in audiology, we don't have a really nuanced palette of clinical measures that are going to be able to tell us whether these new innovations are working or not. We still have quite crude measurements in audiology. So maybe that's the thing that we should be developing. They do want painkillers. They do want the vitamins. We've established that. I work in the NHS on a Monday, and I work in amplitude hearing on a Friday, and I'm a researcher Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that has taught me a lot about how you could potentially innovate around how clinicians work between the two sectors. I lose nothing and gain a lot by being able to access the technologies that are available on both sides. Different lengths of appointments, different types of patient, different motives. Yeah, there's definitely lessons there that were nothing to do with why I came up with amplitude hearing in the first place. So it's a little bit meandering, but we're learning things that we wouldn't have been able to learn without setting up the clinic. Okay, I'm going to move away from amplitude now and just say a bit about the research side of things. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm working on bone conduction hearing devices. And these are just a couple of examples. So Medel and Oticon Medical are the people that are kind of sponsoring and donating to our research. This device here is an implantable bone bridge, which essentially vibrates the skull to essentially displace the skull relative to the hearing apparatus, which is inside a fluid encasing the cochlea. So it vibrates and moves the skull, and that displacement relative to the head of the inner ear results in hearing sensation. We get the same thing from devices on the outside. You've probably seen some people wearing, some of you fit these devices on, teaching my grandma to suck eggs, but those of you that haven't, there are lots of ways of vibrating a head, and you're going to see some more from the research that we do. But the main thing is that what we're doing here is we're trying to overcome a blockage. So the outer ear down to the eardrum, or the middle ear where the bones of hearing, the ossicles. This is a cantilever system that works it takes the surface area ratio from the eardrum down to a really small window on the cochlea, and a leverage system of the way that the ossicles are suspended and moving relative to each other, and you get a huge uplift in force, which overcomes this impedance problem that we have, being land mammals. So we've got some fluid in the inside and we've got some air on the outside. If you just shout at a bucket of water, you just get a lot of sound bouncing off the bucket of water. If you try to call someone while they're swimming under the water, it doesn't work. The middle ear is the evolutionary solution to us being on land. But when it's broken, that massive uplift that you get as a ratio goes away. So you've got like a 60 decibel hearing loss, which is wiping out verbal communication, essentially, maximal, what we call conductive hearing loss. And on an audiogram, it looks like this, where you, through the headphones, they can hear halfway down the page or a third of the way down the page. But through the bone, if you send the signal through the bone, they can hear at the top of the chart. So they're much more acutely sensitive to sounds through the bone. So we need a device that's going to be able to vibrate through the bone and get the signal in. That's just one example, a perforated eardrum, and often with in the low income countries that we work in Africa, I'm going to tell you a bit about, we'll see a chronic discharge due to an ongoing infection, which can last a lifetime. These are huge numbers, which I'll come on to. So that's just one example. You can keep that in mind. So we're doing a clinical trial in the NHS. It's just about to start up as a feasibility trial. Is the bone conduction, is it actually better than a traditional hearing aid? If you look at the commissioning guidance for the NHS look at and what the commissioners look at, we actually don't have that much evidence. And we keep them on traditional hearing aids for a long while, and only if that's not working because of infections or discomfort or other reasons which I won't bore you with, then they'll be given this currently more expensive device. If we had evidence to show that a subset of patients should be just given this one, it's going to be miles better for them from the off. It should be commissioned that way, that it might change the landscape. I'd be interested to talk to some of you that are in this space, whether you think I'm way off economically. The manufacturers think that if we open that space up and had evidence to influence UK policy, then they can manufacture to scale and everything changes. Let's chat. I can see some smiles and smirks. So again, we're back to translation. So I've taken my translation linear pathway that I was talking about before, and I've curved it round because now we're going to add on a few more bits from what we're doing it with the clinical work that we're doing. So in the environment that I'm working in now, we get some mechanistic insight and we can innovate for technologies. I should say in the PhD, we learned those clever things about inflammation and risk factors for device failure, but we didn't implement them. We didn't have time. I'm not involved with these clever studies that are eluting molecules into the inner ear to fend off overzealous scarring reactions. I'm not part of that, but it's exciting that they're happening in my absence. What I'm doing now is linking it with, so we've got our own clinical trials in bone conduction. We have a few going on. I've told you about one of them. Ideally, to change clinical practice, then we'll obviously be looking at that practice on a day-to-day basis in the NHS. And we'll be like, is this good enough? Do we need to go around again? And this is just what we do, isn't it, in clinical research. So the last little section, third of the talk, is global health. So again, we're staying on this same kind of form factor of devices, but we're applying it in Malawi and Zambia. This is a group of people working on an NIHR-funded global health grant. So my boss and mentor is Professor Mahmoud Bouta. He's an ENT surgeon who does a lot of bone conduction implant work. But he, like me, is a research clinician, somehow manages to do about 15 jobs. He's managing to prop all this up and doing a great job of it. In this group here, we have the local language experts, so people that speak Chichewa, which is a Bantu language. It's their local tribal language. So people that work professionally in translation and transcription. Nyasha in the middle here is my PhD student who's doing the study that I'm about to tell you about. Then we have other professionals that are working in and around the project in different capacities. Some of them are PhD students doing work that's connected to ours. We're doing a device. Another one is allowing patients to self-care if they have a chronic infection. They can't get to hospitals and there's no antibiotics at all. So I should say this in the backdrop of no healthcare infrastructure. We need a device that can help them get through that blockage without an audiologist. And can they rinse it out and wash it themselves? So they came up with a iodine self-wash system. So yeah, innovations that are in the space of no tech background, very little infrastructure. So the background for chronic suppurative otitis media, that's the one with the chronic perforation in the eardrum, and it's weeping, and it can last pretty much a lifetime, is massive globally. So pretty much 300 million people are walking around with a smelly, discharging ear, which is in many cases causing a hearing loss. So more than half of them, 2/3 of them, have significant hearing impairment from that discharge. So it has all sorts of, you can imagine, social, psychological impacts. We're particularly interested in communication, but this is such a burden globally. In Malawi, it affects 5.5% of school-aged children, especially in rural areas. So we're working in the community. It's not as bad in cities where there are lots of charity-funded hospitals. But in rural Malawi, it's a serious problem. And the background to kind of compound this is the WHO World Report on Hearing. It tells us that only 9% of people in low-income countries are accessing hearing devices. So almost no people that have hearing loss are able to get access to the devices that can overcome that. It gets a bit better in middle-income countries. It's due to cost, access for various reasons. Just getting to places, there are the public transport links, personal ownership of cars. So the training, healthcare infrastructure, and just the staff that are trained to do the things that we would do just aren't there. So to address it, we want a device that's affordable, self-managed, because they need to do it themselves. We want to avoid blocking the ear canal because it's discharging. And if you close it up, it increases the moisture and the temperature, which is just a bad breeding ground for bacteria, or a good breeding ground for bacteria. The bone conduction is going to be the one that bypasses the problem. So we'd like it to be bone conduction. This is an example of an air conduction hearing aid, and that's an example of a leisure bone conduction device. So you see these ones, cyclists and runners are wearing them. And it doesn't function quite in the same way as the ones I've told you about, like an implanted one, or one that's screwed to the head or worn on a soft band, which is on the side of the temporal bone. This is sat in front of the ear, so it's a slightly different device, which is important. These devices are cheap, so we get them made. I'm going to tell you a bit. I've kind of jumped the gun slightly, but we do get the devices made by a factory in China that essentially copies the leading brand, Shocks. Copy those, make some slight changes to them, pair them to a remote Bluetooth mic, and you've essentially got an assistive listening device for 35 quid. The ones I was showing, the medical devices, they're £3,000 off the shelf. And we just took a load of them to Malawi, and I can vouch for the invoice has really high numbers on it. So these devices are super expensive. It's completely prohibitive for that population. So we want to evaluate the effectiveness and user experience of a low-cost bone conduction headset in individuals with in Malawi and Zambia. That's the device. It's the Hear Glue Ear headset. If you go on Hear Glue Ear website, you'll see these for, I forget the price at the moment, it's somewhere around £35, £40. It's that device with a paired Bluetooth mic. There's a child wearing it. It's great for overcoming distance because it's a remote microphone. So if a teacher wears it, it will overcome the distance and that therefore improve the signal to noise ratio. And it will deliver the sound onto the head, which is great. This is what we're looking for. Here's just examples of how we are going to be collecting the data. The data collection is about to start. This PhD has been building up for a year. So these trucks belong to the Malawi Wellcome Liverpool research program. I'll mention that at the end. But it's basically a Wellcome Trust funded link up between Liverpool University or the Tropical Medicine LSTM and a local research institute. So they have these vehicles and they have these donated audiology clinics on wheels, which they can pull into the community, and we can use our mobile audiology rig to do some testing. So we've spec'd this stuff to not require batteries. So you don't recognize any of that audiologist in the room probably, because it's audio interfaces that you would use for bedroom audio production, loudspeakers that are powered by batteries. There is a sound level meter in there, so you can tell that it's legit work. We are actually calibrating. But it just needs to be completely transportable and fully flexible so that we can design the tests to our needs, which is a great segue onto designing tests. In the UK and the rest of the Western world, we have the luxury of being able to test speech perception in the native language, having developed and validated tests for the last 60 years. In many countries, they haven't been through that process of defining words, translating them, working out the phonetics and the linguistics of that, recording them, and putting them into tests that you can use in the clinic. So we've taken the first steps to doing that in the local language, which is Chichewa. So some of the words are kind of from Anglo roots. So the chain is cheni, so you'll see a lot of that, a word that they might not have had before. Western people turned up into that region. So I should have said this, Malawi, Zambia, this is kind of old Rhodesia. So these are kind of British colonies. So it's really interesting that there's a lot of British infrastructure there, and a lot of people do speak English. But if you cross over the line from the radius around the university to the local communities, and that goes away. So, and we need experts from the community to help us. So they help us with the translation. Here, you can't read this. So cheese is not common in rural settings. Many children have never seen or tasted it. That was the feedback from the translator. So cheese is not on our word test. And loads of other words as well. Circle, no translation for circle. So the way that they communicate shapes is through objects. So they'll be describing an object and they'll be like the thing that has a circular shape. They don't say the shape itself. And lots of interesting, so we're learning about their language as we're picking out the objects that we want to have attached to these images.
Why are you translating instead of identifying the sounds that you want to test and then basing the test on a word list that has all the sounds that you want to test?
For the PhD, two quick answers: pragmatism and ecological validity. So just want the words that we know that they use. So we've started out with 150 words, and we got down to the words, with their help, of the ones that they will use a lot of. We didn't take a phonetic route. We won't get into this, but by doing lots of randomized presentations of trials across a duration of time, and by each participant being their own control, device 1 and device 2, so it's not a clinical test that needs to tell us something about the person relative to the normative data, it's them versus themselves. The variability will be broad, but it will come out in the wash to some degree because of that design feature. With a bit of time in this PhD, or even in another PhD, we can do much better phonetic, linguistic, acoustic analysis to know where we're hitting on the audiogram. Good question. Don't like that question. You're absolutely right, yeah. Yeah, so for non-audiologists in the room, if your hearing is good at picking up ch, but not very good at picking up oo, that's really different, and we're not paying much attention to that. So mpando is chair, and that has a really particular acoustic profile, which matters for their hearing test results. So yeah, we're, I guess, coming at it from a slightly inverted route to what we've had the luxury of in English speech tests. But if we want to get data quick in this PhD and we want it to be the words that they use and we know that they do, we're going for that. I sat and had a beer after we'd recorded. So we have an expert Chichewa speaker from the translation team speak the words out and advise us as we go along about, we do many takes. She tells us about the consistencies of the different phonemes as she goes through, and we do as much as we can of trying to keep acoustic balancing across any given word so that it's most representative of that language. She advises on that, and then I edit them down to a corpus that is the one that goes forward. I was having a beer that night, and then about 3 o'clock that next morning, I got my annual traveller's belly, which I get every time I'm in Malawi. So this looks great fun, and it's like a paradise out there, but it got really, really gnarly for a few days while I could not break off. So we kept on in the lab working with, I should say, Mark Fletcher here at Southampton was helping on the software side. So I'm tidying up, cleaning, and clipping the audio for the test corpus, and Mark is helping us put that into a MATLAB app that can present objects to a patient and have the system present one of, so a word is presented in audio, it's one of 4 objects. This is based on the Manchester Word Picture Test, borrowed from their design. So they hear from that speaker our word, at different levels, and they have to select. So the neat thing is here, we don't need a fluent Chichewa speaker in the room to say they got it right or not, because they're not going to repeat the word, they're going to select using a keypad that they're holding in their hand. So yeah, thanks to the collaboration that we have with Mark, we were able to kind of pull together what we're doing on the ground in Africa with the expertise of building psychometric tests. So yeah, we do that, and we present loads of rounds of that. Each time this trial comes around, it will have randomly a different audio from the 4, and the order of the groupings of 4 is random as well. And yeah, they're selecting, and it just goes round and round, and we do different levels, and we'd want to be able to see that, really, we want a test that is sensitive and specific to the performance of the different devices. I didn't mention that we're taking with us not just the affordable device, but the expensive devices. So we'll be able to see the performance difference between the two. The manufacturer of the expensive device is particularly interested in this data, you can imagine. So we're doing other metrics as well as this one, pure tones and self-report questions, standardized self-report questionnaires. Again, we don't have those questionnaires in Chichewa, so there's a step of translation which affects the validity, but we've got to do what we've got to do. Neatly, we do have an expert qualitative researcher on board, and we're doing interviews, give us an insight into the real experiences to support what we're doing quantitatively. Right, this matters because it identifies key predictors of device uptake. So we want to know if we've measured that this device is going to work on the ground in that community. If we start putting in place drives to bring in thousands of them, is it going to land right? Is it going to translate to uptake and impacting, say, classrooms? Benchmarks for low-cost device. We want to know how good it is. If 40 quid is pretty good up against a 2.5 grand, 3 grand device, we've probably got problems. I don't think we're going to get there. The way that it works is slightly different, so we're probably going to see no device at all here. Our cheaper device does something, and it's probably really valuable to have it, but the clinical medical device is probably going to be a cut above. It'd be nice if our measures can bring that out. It supports scalable, affordable hearing care solutions in low resource settings. There's been drives to do this. Hearing aid manufacturers are out in these countries. Starkey is out in these countries. Medel is out there funding some CI work, cochlear implant work. There have been some pushes, but it tends to fall over because we haven't got the infrastructure to keep it sustainable. They need it to be in their own hands. Advanced global hearing health equity. That kind of just touches on what I've just said. At the moment, we have this kind of, the West will donate. In the NHS, we give our old hearing aids to Africa. And I can tell you now, I'm working in these departments every few months, or if not every year, and you walk into these departments and you see the big buckets of hearing aids, and you're like, oh God, here they are. So when you've worked in the NHS and you see them go off, that's where they are. And they're a lifesaver. They do change people's lives, and then annoyingly, they run out of batteries. That's the next big thing. So I should say that on the grant, we have solar panels funded for these rechargeable headsets. So they should be self-powering to some degree. We did some lab-based here at SVR, we've got better acoustic labs than we have. Just really quickly, we set it up in a few different ways. We measure the bone vibration from the device, and we measure the air conduction on some mannequin heads. The air conduction is really good at the top of the chart there. We don't get any attenuation, so it's putting the sound onto the head and through the air and into the ear. It's great for us if we can hear, not so good if you've got a blockage. The bone conduction is all right at some frequencies, but at low frequencies, it drops off quite a lot. So 40 dB. So it's really going to depend on the individual person. If they've got very, very sensitive inner ear, and they turn the volume up, and they get the benefit of the signal-to-noise ratio being better because of that remote microphone, it could all come together to mean better outcomes. And there's a few studies in Cambridge with like 20, 30, 40 children that show that the device is working. That kind of tells us that that explains why it does work, but it's not awesome, is it? So maybe we can do a little bit better. So the one proposal that working with Mark we came up with is that because we are learning about the device, and through Mark's lab he's developing techniques for bringing together devices that are essentially modular, so components from China brought together with 3D printing into a device that functions as a whole. With our knowledge and design capabilities, we could send the designs to Africa. They could order from China the components and print the headset. It could couple better, because we know that it should couple better. We know that where it should go on the head now. And they could have their own manufacturing process, which could be impactful. So much more affordable. They're not waiting for that delivery from the West. It could create jobs around hospitals, public, private sector. They've got their own ownership, potentially scalable, definitely sustainable, and obviously better hearing, better lives. Those devices have been out there, I should say, on some small studies, and the qualitative data is that those kids hold on to them and cherish them. So we might think of them as recreational assistive listening devices. They're not as good as bone-anchored devices, but we're seeing that after 2 years, they're still holding on to them. Can we make profit out of it? I don't know about that. But if we were to propose this to investors, we've thought about where we would sit in the kind of the territory of cost and efficacy. So we know that for a lot of money, you can get a highly efficacious device. That's the Medels and the Oticon devices that I've mentioned, the devices that you would buy from them and fit as a medical device in the NHS or similar. We've got these cheaper devices. Our device I've called Raspberry Pi here. That's the Hear Glue Ear one that I've mentioned. It's very cheap. We think that it's proven efficacy is there, if not a bit low, because we haven't got good data. We're about to get good data. So there's a big space here for a really effective, efficacious device that's affordable. I mean, you know from being at conferences, you talk like this in front of hearing aid manufacturers, and they're ushering you out of the room. So there'd have to be a business model that would make that work for everyone. Finally, this is the final summary slide. So to make this translational stuff work, what I'm trying to do, there's a shell symbol in the middle here. So Sussex Hearing Lab is a very small group of us in Sussex that work in the NHS. So I'm as you know, an audiologist who works in a hospital 1 or 2 days a week. We have a joint clinical research office which connects the hospital to the medical school. So we're really lucky to have that kind of environment of collaboration and linked up working for studies, for clinical trials. And now we're fostering these new relationships back to Southampton. So we've got, obviously, you guys here with Mark and other people at ISVR, and I've got some other collaborators in Sussex. And that is about it for me. So NIHR fund the global health work. Malawi Welcome are interesting to look up. If you're interested in any of this global health work, MLW and Zambart, that's the equivalent in Zambia. And then obviously private funding and donations we get from Medel and Oticon Medical. And obviously University of Southampton has to be acknowledged. And there I am back in my 1980s Burnley setting, full loop back. So I've taken 55 minutes of your time there. Thank you all for listening. Any more questions? Go easy on me. Cheers, thank you.
Much, Alan. Do we have some questions for Alan?
Everyone's fried.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question and a comment. So the question is really, with the ear defender and the whole thing, has there been any allowance or exploration for neurodivergent children who can't process input noise, and therefore in order to be calm and steady and able to learn and in that just right place, they do need the ear defenders? Or that's kind of got to be teased out a bit more.
Yeah, so you've really got me here, because I'm practicing in a low information environment. So I write to a SENCO in schools weekly to say, can we put in place, and it's always specific, but essentially a whole pass or some kind of, can we raise a card, put a card on the desk, because learning is ceasing at this point for this child because of the classroom setup, the babble, the whatever the setup is. So I'm definitely an advocate of, for this child in this moment, silence is the only way that we're going to get any learning done. but I can't speak to the data. And probably, there's probably 15 papers in the last 3 months that I should know of. It's not really my research area. I use my intuition a fair bit and get good outcomes, I should say. When the SENCO knows what they're doing, collaborating with the teacher, parents are on board, we can put things in place and then adjust them when they come back. So the answer is yes, we do put ear defenders on and or take them out into the schools. Increasingly have these kind of hubs, don't they, where it's like a safer, quieter space. I'm a big advocate of that. It's just personalised care, isn't it? Yeah.
And the comment is to encourage you for your big APD reports that it's not national across England at all, but there are many authorities where the teachers of the deaf will provide radio aid systems that don't amplify to children with APD. So your reports might hit good things. It's not quite the Hear Glue setup, but there are systems that don't amplify that you can wear. Mostly they go in the ear though, but with the little domes.
Yeah, like a phonak setup.
Yeah. So
that's
keep doing it. Keep doing it.
And that explains why. And I had one of my friends who runs a service in North London who was letting off some steam recently about the fact that the report came back recommending remote listening devices to improve signal-to-noise ratio. So, we can't afford the devices, so why does it say it in the report? This is why. So that's really interesting to hear. I'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any? Oh, we have more.
I wondered, you were looking at the acoustic responses of the Hear Glue ear system versus a bone conduction or an air conduction.
Where you could see the air
device.
conduction and the bone conduction.
Have you looked at the shocks as a kind of intermediate? I just wondered if you knew what their acoustic response was and whether that would be might it be better than the cheaper version?
It's a good question. I've got that data. Yeah, it's a little bit better.
Okay.
Yeah, shocks is its frequency response is a little bit more uniform. This isn't out anywhere yet. What we also see is its linearity in terms of its input-output function is better. So if you put a soft sound in, you get a certain amount of gain and you get a boost on it, but it's lifted up by a relative amount, say 15 decibels. You put a moderate level of sound in, you get that same 15 decibel uplift for the shocks. And with the Hear Glue ear, we get more compression. It doesn't behave itself as nicely. Might, in simple terms, just not have the dynamic range to be able to reach higher outputs. So it ends up squashing, which is just not as good, is it? Yeah, good question.
Yeah, great project. You must come and kind of tell us the outcome sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll start data collection soon, so I'd love to do that, thank you.
Or was it over here? Oh, we've got to dance through these chairs. There you go.
How, with having it done locally and with the 3D printed, how are you dealing with the issue of retention with bone conduction devices? Because if it was then the material that's being used for the 3D printing, are you then worried about the retention getting less over time and then having to then upkeep and change the device consistently? Or is that something that's not really been an impact in it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's probably two parts to it, like what do we do to ensure that it's the right one in the first place? Through the studies we've been doing in ISVR, we've measured the output of the device when it's in its kind of floppy, kind of plastic silicone form, and we've weighted it according to the ISO standard that we use for bone conduction testing. I think it's 5 newtons. So we know about its output when we weight it, which is miles better. You get really good coupling, but you lose comfort. So there's a continuum there. And actually, it's not as bad as you think, transitioning between the two. So one answer could be, if we get it good, if we get it, good enough. Yeah. A proper answer would be, I put on the slide there that R&D would happen here. So one of the things that Mark's been doing with his haptic devices with wristbands over the years is looking at different materials and different protocols for printing that give you different kind of compliance, stiffness, physical characteristics. So I think you get it right in terms of its design, in terms of CAD CAM at this end. And if they follow the protocol and have the right materials at that end, it should produce a device that has properties that we've designed in. But if it goes a bit floppy, it does still work. But yeah, you're right. It's an important thing. And we know that kids that wear soft band bone conduction devices, you know that if they're floppy, they're not hearing it very well, are they? So it is a real factor. What I've not really mentioned here, there's a variable that's super important. It's now in the published data in the last couple of years, is that moving it from here to here brings on board another bone conduction route, which we don't talk about much in audiology, which is through soft tissue. So it vibrates the soft tissue in front of the ear as well as the bone, and it causes the soft cartilaginous canal to oscillate and increases the sound pressure just in front of the tympanic membrane. And you get that benefit here, but not there. It sounds great. This is a dream way of boosting the sound. The problem is it gets completely attenuated by middle ear. So there's a bit of a seminal paper out there. Its final line is like, these devices are not appropriate for clinical populations. And you can see the sense there because it's not bone conduction as we know it. It's coupling in a different way.
Okay, so do we have any more, or are we done?
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much. So